this episode of Lives on the Line, the podcast. Northern California. PTSD affects law enforcement officers every day, both active duty and retired. I sit down with Rich and Dave to discuss this and their careers. 3, 2, and we're rolling. Rich, hello, sir.
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you. Dave, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me out here. It's beautiful out here.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really nice. So you're both retired?
That's correct.
Okay. And where are you retired from?
Long Beach, California.
Okay. Down in SoCal?
Yes.
That's really nice as well.
It is.
Yeah. And then Dave?
Placer County.
Okay.
Did 24 years.
Okay. With the SO?
Yes.
How was that?
It was fantastic. It was a great career, but it was time for me to leave.
Really?
Yeah, it was time. Yeah, when you start feeling like a cancer inside is eating you, it's time.
Okay.
Time to leave. And I was getting to the point where I was hating my refrigerator. I was hating the tires on my car, things like that. I'm done. I was done.
What do you think was causing that?
I think just the stress.
Okay.
And what a law enforcement officer, deputy goes through from day to day.
Yeah.
Including firefighters.
So when did you start back with Placer County?
1984.
Okay.
Yeah. And went through 3 sheriffs, they were all fantastic sheriffs. And, it was just time for me to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't do 30 years. So I retired at 50.
Okay. And then Rich, when did you start with Long Beach?
I actually started at a young age. I was 17, started as a police explorer, and actually wanted to start at 16, and my mother told me to wait another year just to make sure that's what I wanted to do, because I had a few things going at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I became a police explorer. I did that for 2 years. I was a sergeant at the end of my second year, and wanted to take it to a second step, excuse me, and became a reserve police officer. I did that for 6 years until 1991, when I decided to be a full-time police officer. So I tested and was hired in 1991. I had put myself through a basic academy in 1988. Waited a few years because I was actually applying for other agencies at the time, even though I was a reserve for Long Beach. Was actually hired with, for most people who don't know, we actually had the California State Police. I actually worked for them for a day.
Oh, wow.
Before they gave me the call and said that they were going to be disbanding and becoming part of CHP. And they asked me if I wanted to stay with them, and I told them no. It wasn't my career goal to be with the CHP. No offense to any of those officers out there.
Right.
So I stuck with Long Beach, worked 23 years there. Coming up to my 24th year, I was one of those officers where I had gone to enough retirement parties with a lot of the senior officers, with sergeants and other officers who were retiring. And all I kept remembering in the back of my mind was, I wish I would have done this, I wish I would have done that during their career. Well, the wish that I always had in my dream was to work up here in Northern California in El Dorado County as a deputy sheriff. So I made the move. I had a lot of stuff going on at home. I was pretty much where Dave was. I was completely burned out working in the city. I had worked investigations for the last 9 years of my career down there, and had some pretty major calls prior to when I still worked patrol, and then leaving patrol and going into detectives. It took a toll. The drive, my commute to live out in the middle of nowhere was taking a toll. The commute was getting worse and worse, and then of course work-related stuff was just really hampering down on my mindset. So I made the move. I tested with El Dorado. I tested. Was hired in May of 2014. I lasted about 3 months before everything from Long Beach and then the move, everything. It was the move, new people, new job, new area. Didn't know anyone, had no one I could go talk to when things were just weren't working for me, I guess you could say, where I could go talk to someone with my old agency to tell them I'm having a hard time with this or a hard time with that. I was kind of left on my own a little bit out here with this agency to figure stuff out, and I really didn't have anyone I could go talk to and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this because I don't understand it. In about 3 months to the day, I basically showed up for work. I was sweating. I was super nervous. I couldn't focus, and it wasn't right for me to, take my FTO out in the field and have him have to babysit me, not being in my A game. So I had gone home sick, not knowing what was wrong, thinking that maybe I was catching something or wasn't sure what was going on. My wife had made an appointment for me the following day to go to the doctor, and the doctor basically made a reference or an appointment for me to go see a counselor. And that following day, I was diagnosed with PTSD, with moderate PTSD. So that was pretty much the end of that part of my career until I moved forward.
Now, what year was this?
This was 2014.
Okay, 2014. Because I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were times when it was difficult for officers to be diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah, there's a huge problem in the U.S. and statistic-wise, there's basically about 850,000 police officers or peace officers in the United States. That's everything. It's deputy sheriffs, that's police officers, that's park rangers, that's probation. That's everything that's law enforcement related in the U.S. And there's about 10% of the agencies in the U.S. that actually recognize PTSD as an on-duty injury, and even less for departments who want to recognize when someone has symptoms or showing signs of PTSD for any kind of peer counseling. It's actually a horrible, horrible way that our agencies are not taking care of us. The military has even a bigger problem as far as PTSD, but they actually have a much more better way of counseling and helping out those who are showing the signs of PTSD. And you have to remember that a military person or someone who's being deployed has done 1, 2, or 3 deployments. Their deployments are about a year long in the combat zone. And they're seeing some pretty bad and horrific stuff out there. But what people aren't realizing or even recognizing is that a police officer, any kind of law enforcement officer who's on front line working a patrol car in the streets, is seeing horrible stuff over a 20, 30-year career, and it's taking an even bigger toll on them.
Right.
And we're having a huge problem with suicides. Officers who are doing it on duty, officers who are retiring and doing it, months after they're retired. It's taken way too much of a toll on what's happening with those of us out there who are in law enforcement or even retired. I've called Post, and I have not gotten a response back from them yet, asking them if they're actually teaching any kind of counseling in the academies these days in California. Post, for those that don't know, is Police Officer Standards and Training, which is the state that sets all the standards for police officers in the state of California for their training. And I didn't see anything in their curriculum. If it's being taught, it's being taught separately because that can be done with agencies who do their own policies and training in the academy, plus what Post requires. So that could be happening, but as far as I know, there's nothing from Post that's teaching a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour course on how to deal with PTSD or recognizing the signs of PTSD.
Nothing consistent across the board for different agencies, and even more, probably no real data collection as far as who's suffering from this and the amount of suicides that are occurring from not only on duty or that are still active, but also retired law enforcement officers. You just don't know how many there are.
No, there's the feds are not keeping track yet. Like they do with police officers who are killed in the line of duty. They're not keeping track of the officers who are committing suicide throughout the nation. There's a couple of private companies that are doing that right now.
Right. Dave, did you see similar things in your career?
In the 80s, I was having a rough time, and I went to the jail division, and a few things went down, and I went to my sergeant, and he said, "Get over it," and that totally blew me away. You know, back then, we didn't recognize PTSD. Fortunately, I don't have it. I don't think I do, but we all break down. I mean, I still break down sometimes.
Sure.
Just thinking about something, went down in your career.
What did they classify it as back then? It was just someone just not being tough enough for the
Like you
streets.
just said, you were tired.
Yeah, just get over it.
Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, part of our culture is then we tend to turn to other things to relieve some of those pressures and pains, like alcohol and things like that.
Sure. I mean, back then, we had donuts every morning at briefing.
So that's where it came from then.
And now it's croissants.
Right.
I think we have gotten. I come from the old school,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we're getting away from the old school. And there's too many laws
Mm-hmm.
in this state that stops a cop from doing their duties.
Mm-hmm.
So from the donuts, now we go to the croissants, and we're getting a whole new type of cop, law enforcement, in the state.
Do you think that's impacting negatively law enforcement?
Oh, I think so. Look at all the killings that we've had.
Absolutely.
Look at all the killings we've had in the last year. Just in California, we've had 6 cop killings
Right.
from August until January of 2019.
There's a whole new, like Dave is saying, there's a whole new breed of young officers out there. And to give you an example, before I left Long Beach, the cell phone is becoming a nasty thing with law enforcement too. I've seen officers. I could go to a call when I was still working down there and get to a call, talk to an officer, and see him texting and say, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm texting an officer to see if he can back me on a call." And I'm like, "Oh, why aren't you using the radio?" "Well, it's just there's too much traffic." And it's like, well, how is everyone else supposed to know where you're going and what you're doing? Why aren't you asking them on the radio so that everybody can tell that you need a back or you want someone to follow you to this call? It's a whole new generation of officers and mindset. And I'm not going to say that officers are getting less officer safety training. I'm thinking that these officers are just using a different standard, and I don't know if, I haven't been to a police academy in,
Sure.
30 years, but definitely what they're teaching them now is not what seems to be what we were taught back then. It's all, like Dave says, it's not, I don't think that they're not being safe. I think that there's just something different about how they're doing law enforcement these days as it was, back in the 80s when I first started too.
Yeah. So you think there might be more of an emphasis, less on tactics and more so on building relationships with the community? Not to say that is wrong. That's definitely something we need to do. But
well, you didn't used to have to watch your back at a traffic accident either.
Right.
You went out there, you took care of business, made sure everybody was good, took care of the cars. You wrote your report. This is not the first time someone shot an officer at a traffic accident report. It's getting to the point to where, these, if anything, these officers need to be taught, to have a third eye in the back of their head, or, if something just doesn't look right, don't be afraid to call for a backup. There's agencies that, your backup might be a half hour to an hour away. Start them. If you're, got an agency close to you, ask for a backup. Out here in El Dorado County, the deputies are far, far away from other agencies, and the mutual aid they get from either CHP, the park rangers, the state park rangers out here, even the federal park rangers. If someone calls for help, it's whoever they can get. Doesn't matter what their training consists of. It's knowing that there's a second person and with a siren, with a gun, with some kind of training that's coming out there to help them.
I was talking to Assemblyman Frank Bigelow, and we need to try to get funding for a 2-man car again. Maybe not in the rural areas as much, but the cities. I think we need to go back to that, because the world's changing.
Absolutely.
For the worst. And you have to have more eyes than just the two you have.
What do you think's causing that change, do you think?
Money. To get more money. Long Beach did the same thing. We used to be two-man cars. Anything after 5 o'clock at night until 7 the next morning, we're all two-man cars. And we were getting, the agency was losing officers. We had a hiring freeze for a while. And the council, the city council, and the chief and everyone else came up with this deal where if you want to work a one-man car, you get 15% extra on your paycheck. And guys fought to be a one-man car where all the old-timers, I was young at the time, so I was looking at the money. But I fell right into that trap where we started having more officers get hurt. What the other thing was is the city thought, yeah, they had more one-man cars, but they also had two cars following each other to every call. So they basically were using more gas, but still getting two officers to these calls.
So there's incentive to.
Absolutely.
Wow. It's
But
hard to believe.
That's where the second set of eyeballs comes in and keeps you alive. Officers have been killed. Law enforcement officers have been killed through the ages, and it's going to continue to happen. Unfortunately, that's just the day that we live in. But when you take away a second person, whether it's a brand spanking new recruit out of the academy or a seasoned officer, you're taking away that safety. You're taking away that knowledge that is allowing that officer to survive his shift. And actually have someone in the car. It's another thing that has to do with suicide for officers too, is you no longer have that partner in the car to talk to. If you want to tear up and cry, or go get a cup of coffee or go get a donut, like some of us still do.
Love donuts.
To sit down and talk about what did you just see. And I had the pleasure prior to becoming a one-man car in my early days of Long Beach, having I was involved in a shooting. I wasn't the shooter, but might as well have been. I've had, horrible calls where you just don't know what to do, and your partner is smart enough to take you, to go get a coffee break or to sit down, go someplace and, where you're going to write a report and just talk about what you just saw. I don't think that's being done anymore, and I think that's why you see the suicide rate of officers just skyrocketing throughout the U.S.
And suicide right now, correct me if I'm wrong, it accounts for more officers that are killed in the line of duty.
We lost 157 nationwide this last year, and this will actually be the third year in a row that we've lost more officers to suicide in the U.S. than officers being killed in the line of duty. So,
and we just had one CHP, California Highway Patrolman, while on duty, shot himself. Went on the radio and said, "This is it. I'm out of here," and blew his head off. And this was, I don't know, a couple months ago.
Yeah. So it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Until agencies start recognizing, and unfortunately there's agencies out there that just want to turn a blind eye to what's going on. Just because you have a peer counseling group and the city's thinking that they're doing what they think they should do is not enough. If an officer is having trouble or getting in trouble at work, which is normal, that's one of the signs. If he's starting to drink, if he's starting to get in trouble at work, if he's not doing his job, someone needs to take him off to the side and say, "Hey, what's going on?" Like Dave said, officers resort to drinking. Some actually will take the drugs that they find off of suspects and start using them. They'll find contacts. They'll start having issues at home, with spousal abuse. It gets worse and worse and worse. And like David said, I had the same thing. I went through a divorce back in '94, and I was seeing that pattern of myself, not recognizing it. And when the sergeant finally got a hold of me one night to discipline me on a call that I had, the first thing out of my mouth was, "Sir, I'm not with it. And I'm going through a divorce." And before I could finish my sentence, he says, "I don't care. It's none of my business. Just do what you're supposed to do." And that right there probably set the tone for how it was for the rest of my career. Is I did not talk about what was happening at home.
That's very true.
So it's important for people to actually open up and talk to
Absolutely.
everyone else.
Yeah, and talking with Dave and the new cop, they're all into yoga and they're all into
I do yoga.
all this. Yeah, and you know what? No, perfect. Don't knock it. If you're into yoga, there's a lady I'm going to give kudos to here in a little bit that I spoke to, but meditation, meditation. we're in an area right now, if you can see it in the films later, folks, that's very quiet, that's very peaceful. You can hear the birds chirping in the morning. I've got horses in the background, which is a big, huge PTSD deal for helping you out. Besides dogs, if you've got a dog that's coming up and sitting in your lap when you're having a hard time, you need to pay attention to what the dog's doing. He's not just coming over to look for a handout. He's probably sensing there's something wrong, and you need to pay attention to that. But we just have a huge problem with people just not recognizing that they need some time off. If they have a vacation coming up, if they need some sick time, if they're feeling the stresses of work, they need to go to their sergeants. They need to go to their union and say, you know what, this call is really bothering me, and I need some time off. I need to, just get my head straight. And if you've got time, if you've got any vacation, sick time, something that you can use, and just go someplace, some quiet place that, if it's hunting, go hunting. If it's going camping, hiking, horseback riding, car club, if you're a pilot, if you have some favorite place you like to go for the weekends with your loved one, go do it, and talk to that person, talk to whoever you can about what the heck is bothering you, because it's just going to get worse if you keep letting it go, and it's going to turn into something really bad.
Yeah. I feel like people probably maybe don't want to mention things because, one, to their department, they don't want to have their gun taken away and taken off the streets. And then they may also not want to mention to their family because they don't want to kind of show them the real dangers that their loved one has to go to. So that's why they kind of bottle it up and keep it inside. But that's obviously not healthy.
That's very true.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of this, the stigma still is you don't talk about what's bothering you at your work. Very few officers, have the type of relationship with their loved ones or their partner that they could say, this is really screwing me up and I need some time off, or can we go someplace for the weekend? Just talk about it. I mean, even if you don't specifically talk about what's bothering you, just to have that person next to you to give you a hug or say everything is going to be okay, or the partner. I mean, yeah, it's a guy thing, that you don't show emotions to your partner and stuff like that, but it depends on how close you are with your partner too.
Right.
And again, we don't have a lot of partners in cars anymore, unless you're a training unit. If the recruit wants to talk to their FTO, hopefully the FTO is recognizing that maybe their recruit's having a hard time dealing with a certain call, and hopefully they're taking them off to the side, someplace away from other officers or whatever, and not making fun of them and saying, okay, I understand it. Yeah, it's a hard deal. What do you want to do about it? Do you need to go home? Let's go get a cup of coffee. Let's go get a bagel. Let's go get, a croissant, something, and talk about what did you just see and how are you feeling? You don't have to go into the details, but just talking about what's going on and how to pass that, get through it, and move forward. You don't have to forget. You don't have to forget what you saw, but you need to put it to rest.
Right.
In a way that you're okay with it, and then you're good to go for the next deal.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And it doesn't just apply to training officers. I think it applies to sergeants and lieutenants too. Is
absolutely.
When you guys go to some kind of critical incident and they see something, a train versus a pedestrian, or something to do with children, to after the call is said and done, do a debrief and say, hey, this wasn't good, man.
Right.
How do you feel? How do you feel about this?
Right.
Can we do anything to deal with this?
Right.
Yeah.
Kids are the worst.
Yeah.
Kids, I think for any officer, doesn't matter how hardcore. If you're a 20-year gang detective and you're seeing these small little kids getting killed out in the field, I think it still has an impact on them.
Yeah. And then back to the family thing. And you're right. You don't have to necessarily explain in detail the call that you had to go through. But I didn't know this until recently. But there's a thing called vicarious trauma, I guess, where families can experience similar symptoms to PTSD by just by having their loved one go through these things. I didn't know that was something that could happen, but the families can experience this as well.
Yes. There's PTSD in all different forms. The officer that gets it, from when the call to call on a daily, 4 or 5 days a week, to the, it's a good analogy that I heard doing some research. The average person out there who suffers a loss, someone who's committed suicide, someone who was killed in a car accident, someone whose family member has been sick for a long time and they finally pass, and then sudden things like some kind of an assault, a car accident, some people who lose a pet, who really love that, their pet is basically their kid for, that period of time, can get a form of PTSD or depression, and if not taken care of, can get worse and they can commit suicide. But they can recover from it much quicker than, let's say, a fireman or a police officer, deputy sheriff, military personnel, even a dispatcher. You have to remember, police dispatchers are actually, if you really think about it, the first responders to what emergency is going on out there. I mean, they're the ones that's taking the call. For you to take, 5 minutes out of your day to call the dispatcher and just tell them, and to say, this is what happened, this is what, we did, are you okay? Making sure they're okay. And same thing with tow truck drivers. We're dealing with fatalities. We're dealing with horrible accidents out there. And your tow truck driver's coming out there and cleaning up your mess, and you got to make sure that they're okay too, because they're looking and seeing, what's left over, and they need to make sure that they're okay. But to go on with it is, someone who sees or has PTSD or depression from, a one-time deal that's happened, and basically in their life, it's it's the big deal for them. Whereas a police officer, law enforcement, fire, military, this is a daily occurrence. And the way the analogy kind of works is, it's like having a broken arm. The average person gets a broken arm and can recover 100%. A fireman, policeman, dispatcher, military, they get a broken arm and it's like a metal plate, and the plate's always there. You're always going to have that. And you can get back to 99.9%, but you're never going to be 100% because it's just your injury, it just continues every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a story that I had at the end of my career, is I was in Auburn, California, and I was at the light, a red light. Well, it turned green, and I just sat there in my car. Just sat there. And I knew the light was green, but horns were honking behind me like, let's go. And, PTSD happens. It happens a lot in law enforcement and in firefighting.
And the pressures in law enforcement don't just come from calls or critical incidents, but it can also come afterward, as far as how you're treated from the community, how you're viewed as far as your actions or inactions, and how you're treated by the department.
Yes, absolutely.
That can play a lot into the pressures.
What, let's say an officer involved in a shooting, first he's dealing with all the investigation that takes place that night or that day, right after the OIS or the officer involved shooting. Then he's got to talk to the district attorney's office. Then he's got to worry about the internal affairs part of the investigation. Then he's got to work about the, probably being sued civilly afterwards. There's so much, everything that takes place, in a split second an officer, has to do, drags out for the next 5 years. It's just one more thing on top of, the dead body call that he has to get, or the fatality traffic accidents that he gets, or the child abuse call that he gets, or the sexual assault call that the officer gets, and trying to maintain a professional manner, and still have then go home and talk to the family and take the kids to the ball games or the kids to soccer or whatever. There's so much on their plate. There's some really good stuff out there on the internet, or something you can find in certain gift stores that talk about, how God basically has just packed an officer full of all the knowledge. If you think about it, I'm not knocking the doctors out there. I really am. I'm not. But the amount of information that we have to store and use on a daily basis is completely outrageous. But we do it, and we do it every day. And, like they say, there's tons of Monday day quarterbacks out there, but we're making split second, half-second decisions to save our life or the life of someone else, but someone else can sit there for the next 5 years and pick it apart. And, hopefully your department has your back, because sometimes even your department kind of looks at you funny, and there's another stress.
And then also the district attorney's office too. I mean, you have a valid felony arrest, you take it to the DA, and the DA throws it out. I mean, that's tough on a cop.
Now, do you think politics comes into play with some of these things
I
too?
think so.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, politics, how much it's going to cost them to try the case. Right. Is it easier just to let them go with a cite? Or, hey, I see that maybe you violated this guy's rights or something like that. And it's like, well, at the time, the information that I had said that, I had the probable cause to do what I needed to do. Where, a half hour, a week later, they sit there and they go, well, no, you didn't. Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm human. I'm not a machine. So, all right, I'll do better next time. But with the circumstances in front of me, this is what I did, and this is why, here we are.
Yeah. And to go back to what you said about lawsuits, I don't think that's something that people don't really know about, is that an officer may have multiple lawsuits pending, and not because they did anything wrong, it's just because of a use of force or an officer-involved shooting. And these things get drug out for years, and the officer still has to go out and do their job with these things hanging over their head, not knowing what's going to happen.
Right.
And that adds to a lot of stress as well.
And you have a lot of attorneys that want to draw it out anyway because they're making big bucks, right?
Yeah.
So they don't care about the cop. We have these attorneys that, hey, let's milk this as all we can to get more money. So.
Yeah, we have that, and then you got to remember is not only, like I said, he's got the attorneys and the stuff for his OIS or whatever it may be. It could be an arrest that someone made and they want to, say that their rights were violated or something like that. But now you've also got this officer who's going to court for other cases, other arrests that he's made. So he's got, he's in court quite often. Usually gets tired depending on what shift that they work.
Mm-hmm.
And could have, he could have traffic court one morning. He could be having a trial or a prelim going on, following day. And then he's got to sit down with the district attorney or the city attorney for his lawsuit.
Right.
So there's lots of stuff that people out there just don't understand what goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
With a cop, and it's like they say, you're 10% patrolman and 90% secretary with all the paperwork. Everything has to be documented. Everything, and even with the cameras, you can't just refer back to your camera, to your footage. You're writing stuff down and hoping that what you remember in your mind is what the camera's going to show.
So it's not like the Cops TV show then, where it's just all action-packed and that's it and you go home.
No, but there's some actually pretty good shows out there now. You've got Body Cam that's out now that's actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You got Live PD, which is kind of letting the public see a little bit more than what, Cops got it all started, the cop shows.
One Adam 12. That's what got me started.
There you go, Adam 12. People are going, what's that?
I've heard of it somewhere. I don't know where they're from.
Well, and in my case, my family have all been in law enforcement and firefighters. My godfather was a cop in Emeryville, and my uncle was a cop in Emeryville. This was back in the 50s. So I grew up, in a law enforcement family. So I was kind of groomed into that.
Yeah.
But One Adam 12 was a big thing for me.
Yeah, no, Adam 12 was good. I mean, and it's funny because...
And there was 2 cops in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. At every hour of the day, too.
They had funding for that back then. That's good.
They did. But it's funny because you can now... I was sitting in a room with some young officers about 5 months ago, and we were talking. I was talking with another senior officer about Adam 12, and they look at us and they go, what's that? And
You're
so
looking at one right now.
we took total advantage of these young guys.
You're looking at one right now.
We took advantage of these guys right off the bat and said, well, do you remember when they used to put the card, the 3x5 card on the little strip that would shoot to the dispatcher? And they're like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
So it was very funny to see. We were laughing our butts
funny.
off talking about this because it's actually some of the older Adam 12. The very beginning of the show shows how dispatchers used to get the calls to send out to the officers in what we called a hot call at the time, which was basically setting that card on fire and sending it down the chute. And back then you could do that and not get in trouble.
I wish I knew that one. That would have been fun.
Now you mentioned something really, really important that again, and you said this is something people don't really know that law enforcement have to deal with, and that's it's not just being on the street and going on patrol, but let's say you work graveyard, you get off at 7 in the morning, you have to go to court at 8 o'clock, and you have a trial, and you don't get out until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You've got to come back at 9 o'clock, and between then you got to squeeze in family time, and that starts to weigh a lot on the officer.
Absolutely.
That's really tough.
It is, and then especially if you're going to court, if you're doing a trial that's going to go every day for the next week or so. Yeah, absolutely. And in some cases, some agencies will actually put you on a day shift mode while you're going to court.
Mm-hmm.
Other departments actually have dorms, depending on their station or their substation, where you can go get a couple hours of sleep, depending on how far away you live and the circumstances. But some agencies, I have to hand it to some agencies out there really take care of their officers, really take care of them. They care about their well-being. And then there's other agencies out there who just don't give a crap.
Yeah.
You're there to work to make them look good, that's all they care about, is that you're showing up to work, and that you're doing the paperwork and taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of. That agency, you're making that supervisor, you're making that watch commander, you're making that chief look really good. But in the background, that officer is hurting.
Yeah. Now, Dave, you mentioned that some of the problems that they're facing in California are some of the laws that were going on specific to California. Can you expand on that?
You talking about what, sanctuary cities?
Right.
Yeah. Our great governor at the time, Jerry Brown, signed off for the state sanctuary. I can't remember the number of it.
54.
54.
SB 54.
Thank you. In 2017, October, I think it was 5th, 2017.
Right.
Things have changed very big, a lot. I think that contributes a lot to more crime, what's going on in not just the cities, but in our neck of the woods too, our county. We're getting too soft in the state of California with laws. We have these congressmen, senators, and some assembly members in the state that are just going sideways. They're going sideways on the people, and they just sit in the state capitol and make these laws, and they don't see what's really going down on the street. So I think that the state of California is really going downhill.
I think some of the recent laws that have passed by the voters have probably been put out there without explaining within detail what's going to happen with the laws. Like, for example, lowering some of the crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, and then letting people out with citations and things like that. So there may have been some deception when it comes to putting these laws out to the voters.
Yeah, case in point, in Roseville, day before yesterday, two Placer County detectives went to a Best Buy to arrest the felon, and the felon was stealing out of Best Buy. There was an altercation out in the parking lot where a security guard for Best Buy tackles the suspect. Best Buy fires the security guard the next day because he intervened. Now this guy's a known felon. He's ripping off Best Buy. You have two detectives that need help. Cops need help sometimes from the public. And this great security guy decides to help out and gets fired from Best Buy. Come on.
There's tons of stories out there, and I can't remember how far back, but it was one of the hurricanes that we had back on the East Coast, and you had two officers that were standing in like knee-high water trying to get back to their car that had flooded, and there was a public bus that was coming by, and the driver, who was out of service, opened the doors to let the two cops come onto their bus so they can dry out, and that driver was fired because he allowed two officers to come on his bus when he was out of service. I mean, there's tons of stories of how people are treated out there. It's, like I said, the human touch seems to be going away. And then if you do try and help, you're punished for it.
Yeah. It seems like almost that they're going away from those things because of fear of liability. They're fearful of being sued because of doing something. And there's a lot of people out there that want to sue for anything, unfortunately, and it's making the good people, like you said, not willing to act.
Right. Right.
And even up here, even up north, Dave, you said you saw some of these problems while you're working too with when it comes to some of these laws or sanctuary cities or things like that.
Yeah. After my two deputy friends were shot and killed in 2014 on duty by an illegal alien that's been here, that was deported 3 times, that put me in gear to, I want to go to every county now and talk to every board of supervisor, the state assembly, and tell them what's wrong with this sanctuary state. It's bad, you know. And you have these illegal aliens coming in and killing cops and firefighters. You know, it has to stop. So I do go around different counties, and a lot of times it's on deaf ears. I have talked to board supervisors in their chambers, and it's like, we're not going to do anything about it. You know, it's state level. So,
do you think there's a benefit to having some of these laws in place? To having some, for example, making people that are here undocumented feel more comfortable approaching police with information or reporting crimes? I mean, I think that would be one of the benefits, but not to the extent of not cooperating with federal agencies to get violent criminals out. Obviously, that's something we need to do.
I think part of the problem is, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see ICE going out there and looking for the guy who's, you know, picking on a farm or, you know, doing what he wants to come here to do, probably has a green card, or maybe he is here illegal. I don't think they're looking for something of that nature. I think what ICE and the rest of the problem is that the son of the guy who's doing the picking is an MS-13 or is joining a gang or is doing robberies. And rather than grabbing that kid and taking him to jail and sending him back, they're allowing him to stay here, or they're going after the father saying, well, it's your fault that you brought him. You know, the guy's trying to make a buck, and he's trying to make it in a country that everybody wants to be in. The problem is you know, the father can't be home watching his kid 24/7 because he's trying to make a buck for his family, and the kid, you know, wants to go out and, you know, stretch his wings, but he's doing it in the wrong way. And that's, you know, it just trickles down and becomes that part of the problem. MS-13 is definitely become a huge problem. I think what the president was trying to do with the wall and everything else is something that is way past time to get that up to solve the problem of innocent bystanders being killed by some guy who finds a gun and picks it up and it just goes off and kills, you know, an innocent woman down in the pier. Or, you know, an officer's, you know, trying to stop a drunk driver before he kills someone and gets shot and killed, you know, in a small little town out in the middle of nowhere that no one really knows the name of. You know, it's the illegal alien part and the sanctuary city part are kind of two different monsters. But basically, if you stop one, you stop both. And, you know, putting up a wall is probably going to help with that. It might not solve all of our problems, but I think that's where we need to start.
Yeah, and that was Corporal Singh down in Newman. It was
absolutely
with the DUI driver. Yeah, it was very tragic. Now you work closer to the southern border than Dave and I. Did you see a lot of issues when it comes to that?
I didn't when I first started, as opposed to when I started to leave the department to come up here. I started to see, you know, we started having MS-13 members in Long Beach, and they're scary. They're some scary folks. And the more schools and gang schools that I had gone to, and the more information that were coming out from our own gang unit, I worked juvenile investigations, and every now and then we would get one of these youngsters in our office, and they were just flat out scary. Basically, little militant soldiers out working for the cartels, and they didn't care who was in their way, and it didn't matter how young they were. Very scary, their mindset.
So this isn't a manufactured crisis, as some people would say. There's actually some.
The government would have you believe that. If you were riding in a police car or working with any of the agencies out there that are, you know, trying to combat MS-13, and the president has mentioned MS-13 several times in some of his speeches. That's obviously, it's made it to the federal mind long ago. It's just getting worse, and I think with the president being briefed on something like that goes to show that it's a very serious problem that we have.
Yeah, and with the drugs too.
Absolutely.
And it's not just MS-13 down in Southern California. We have a large Russian Mafia
Yes.
situation up here in this county. Not just El Dorado County, Placer County, but throughout the rural areas. We have the Russian Mafia that's coming up here and hiding out, doing chop shops, stealing cars, and cutting them up, and then dump them out.
Catalytic
in the canyons.
converters.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Car thieving and stealing and tampering is a big deal. That's starting to take place and getting bigger and bigger up in this area.
And they're mean. I mean, I've dealt with some of the Russian Mafia, and they're ruthless. If you think the Italian Mafia was bad, you should deal with the Russian.
Yeah, it's not just car. You've got the human trafficking part of that whole thing that's going on with them. It's huge, and of course the drugs. But yeah, they're a nasty group.
Yeah. So is there any hope then for California?
If we have someone who's got some
gonads,
huevos that can sit down and start talking about what needs to be done, at least in California. So I would say it would probably take a lot. I don't know what this governor that we just got in with Gavin Newsom, if that's going to happen. I think we're probably going to go backwards even more, just from what I've heard and seen and his legacy with Frisco. I'm thinking that we're probably, not only are we going to be a sanctuary city, but I think our state is probably going to fall apart before his term is up.
Now, Dave, you got into politics, correct?
Yes. Now I'm the fire commissioner up here.
Okay.
And the water commissioner. So now water puts out fire with me. And I pretty much got out of law enforcement. But yeah, I'm heavily involved with the county in water and fire.
Okay. Any aspirations to go further than that?
No, I think I ran for the Board of Supervisors back in 2013, and I lost. But out of 8 of us that ran, I did pretty well, coming from a small rural area. Mm-hmm. So I did pretty good. No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to just ride the wave with the fire district. And that's another thing. I know this is getting off a little bit, but the campfire that we had, our guys from the fire department went up there, and they came back, and I ordered a chaplain to come talk to them, because it was obvious that what they seen was bad. We had one guy that I went to a Christmas party, and I talked to him about it, and he started crying. He started bawling, what he's seen. And I was up there for 2 days. I went up to the campfire after the fact. Mm-hmm. And the things that these firefighters and cops went through just for that fire was unbelievable. Yeah. I seen a mother and child laying next to their car burnt up, and another one with their dog and their family in their car toast.
A lot of the stories that you're not hearing on the news and stuff like that about
the news won't tell you.
About the horrors that actually, we hear about the deaths, it starts off with like 1,500 people missing, and it turns down to 80 plus people that end up passing away, and a lot of them in their vehicles trying to escape. You got to remember, someone has to find them, someone has to take them out of the car, someone has to do the DNA. You got the firefighters, you got the first responders, you got search and rescue, who are seeing this horrible nightmare, and now having to deal with it. So you have a lot going on. The public just don't understand and don't hear. And then next thing you know is you're hearing, someone's committing suicide, or now you've got to think of the statistics out there show that for every person who's either killed or commits suicide, that there's 6 others who will get PTSD from that event. So you times that times 6 per person, and the numbers just climb drastically. Now, depending on how they're going to get help, who they're going to talk to, who's going to notice the signs, it has a lot to do with the survival of that person.
Now, are there things that you can do that an officer can do to try to maybe lessen the impact of PTSD on them? I know there.
Yes, I did a YouTube video, 15-minute video that talks about what needs to be done, or what officers, law enforcement, fire personnel, military. And it was something that was taught to me when I first was thinking about being a police explorer at age 17. My mom and dad sent me down the street to talk to a retired Long Beach cop. And so I went down there. Jim Smith, rest your soul, sir, said two things. He said, one, don't just hang out with cops. Just don't be one of those guys where you can't wait to get off duty and go have some beers or something with all the cops.
I've heard that a lot.
Have other friends. That was number one. Number two is, he says, do you have a sense of humor? And considering I was always messing with my parents and telling jokes and screwing with them one way or another in a fun way, I figured I had the sense of humor, and that's probably one of the reasons why I've survived this long. And things changed, as law enforcement's going on and you're trying to have fun, and things have gotten so serious now. In the 80s and 90s, we could drive by another car on the graveyard shift during the summer and throw water balloons at them. We could drive by on a traffic stop and throw a firecracker at them. It kept us awake. It made it fun to come to work, and it passed the time. Number one, it kept you awake. And then things just started getting real serious. We had some officers that had a silly string fight, on a summer night, and unfortunately didn't clean the car off before they brought it back in the next morning, and the string kind of melted to the car. Well, those officers got disciplined, and things just went downhill from there. Just people started getting too serious. Well, cops are human. Cops need to stay awake on a graveyard shift at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning when they're trying to drive around and keep their eyes open and don't have a radio in the car. They need to find some way to have a sense of humor to deal with the stuff that they probably just ended up finishing. If it was a fatality, if it was a shooting, if it was a SIDS death, you have to find a way to break the monotony and have some humor. There might be some agencies that are still doing that these days. Screwing with each other, in a light-hearted way that doesn't hurt anyone. It's not messing up any equipment, but it's a way to relieve the stress.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's still going on. I do know officers out here that have the sense of humor, that do check up on other officers and make sure that they're okay, especially if they've heard about some kind of a horrific call or something that they had been on.
Yeah.
One of the stories I have is in rural Placer County. We have a lot of possums, and they're just the big rats, right? Well, I have no problem throwing a possum in somebody's patrol car, and they drive off, and next thing you hear is a cop screaming like a little girl, and the brake lights come on, and they jump out of their car, and then you're laughing all night long, So that breaks the monotony.
Yeah.
Not saying that I did throw a possum.
Sure,
in the car.
no, of course not. Who would do that?
I've seen it. But
I've had somebody put a person in my back seat, and it's scary to hear someone knocking on the back window when you're driving down the road and you have no idea who's in your back seat.
We've had dead bears in some of the cop cars' trunks. Thank God Crown Vics their trunks are big.
Yeah.
Those old Crown Vics, I loved them. So, yeah. But that's what I've heard. I've just heard that. Kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I
think I've heard that since I've been up here. But yeah, sense of humor. You definitely need a sense of humor in any of the first responders, fire, police, and military. You need a sense of humor, or you're not going to last long in this job at all. If you're not a jokester, or a good jokester, or telling jokes, or just being the guy in the room that tells the joke, or makes fun of someone who was on a call the night before, where everybody can laugh at them, not at them, but with them. That's something you definitely need.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, I think it may go back to our earlier discussion about today's culture and liability and things, whereas some things you may have been able to joke around with before could be construed as insulting or something else now, or maybe somebody just gets offended too easily,
Mm-hmm.
and now we have a problem. And
Yeah.
and now to the point where the pendulum swung completely to the other side, to where we can't say anything at all, and maybe that's why there's not this kind of open discussion and dialogue amongst each other.
Yeah, I agree. It's a much more serious atmosphere. Everybody wants to be offended, and everybody wants to sue, and we can't have that. We've got enough to worry about. That we have to worry about, an officer, a firefighter, or a military person who wants to get all offended. Well, I'm sorry. You need to have a better attitude, considering the career that you've chosen. If you can't handle, a small joke or someone making fun of someone in a nice, polite way without purposely trying to take something and blow it out of proportion, you're in the wrong line of work.
I think it's all within context, and fortunately for me, I work among a very diverse group of people, and we all joke around. We can all, be as mean and nasty to each other as we can be, and it's all.
But
it's all
you
in
love
good fun.
each other.
It's all in good fun, and we know
Right.
we know the context of it. So I think context matters absolutely, and knowing your audience. I tell that to my guys too a lot. Is you and the other folks could be joking around about something that you all agree upon. It's just lighthearted fun, but if you're doing it in a public setting, you're doing it at a restaurant or
Right.
even in the department where there's civilian employees working, you need to know your audience. You need to be careful of
Right.
not to because words do hurt sometimes and they could offend people.
Right.
So you need to
Absolutely.
be very careful.
Right.
And I tell the guys, we're held to a higher standard. I understand you have a First Amendment to say what you want to say, but when you're in uniform, you represent something more than yourself.
Right.
But going back to that, I think one of the reasons why we don't talk to each other as open as we could be is because we're just kind of almost
We're afraid now.
Afraid.
Scared?
We've
Right.
we've gotten
Sure.
afraid to talk to people, and we've gotten away from it, and because there's so much liability, there's so many papers that make you sign when you start to work, or
Mhm.
every 2 years you sign the sexual harassment paperwork for liability. That you're not going to do this or you're not going to do that. Pretty soon it's going to be you can't look at them or smile. It's just getting ridiculous.
Yeah. I'll ask you both this. How did you see the job change from when you first started until when you retired, as far as culturally go, within the department, amongst officers
Well, from
or
donuts
deputies?
from donuts to croissants is one thing.
Okay.
Oh. See, we got to laugh.
I don't like croissants, by the way. I don't like croissants.
I think it's just the laws. It's the people in our state capital. They work for us, and we're getting all these new laws in the state. And I talked to a El Dorado County sheriff a couple nights ago, and he says, "I'm so frustrated that I can't. My hands are tied on different things. It's not. I don't think the county level. It's the state level, and these people need to wake up. These people, these politicians, they need to ride in a police car for a week on Graveyard and see what's really going on. And maybe these stupid laws that are coming out in the state wouldn't happen. They'd really know, hey, these cops are having a tough time. We got to be on their side. And right now it's not."
Yeah.
We've got, you have to remember there's like the AB 109 that came out a few years ago,
Mhm.
where you can bring, it's early release for state prisoners to be under the control of county probation. That was a huge brick that fell on the heads of the different probation departments throughout California. And, going from county prisoners to state prisoners and trying to monitor them, and the people out there, I think when the issue first came out, was that these were all going to be low offense offenders that were going to be on an early release, but they didn't tell you that this guy or this gal had some kind of violence in their history. They just tell you what the last arrest was, and if it was for drugs or for DUI or something along those lines, but they're not telling you the whole story of who these people are. And the state, signed off on it, thinking, making more room in the prisons for the more hardcore people. Well, I'm sorry, these are some hardcore people. You need to just either build more prisons, or you need to figure out a better way. Maybe give them longer sentences or tougher sentences, so that maybe they won't do it again when they get out, and won't be a three striker. We give them 3 chances to figure it out, and they still can't figure it out. So let's just create a new program called AB 109, where, well, the last arrests, they've got 2 strikes already. Let's they just did something stupid this last time, a petty theft, or just got caught with drugs on them. So let's just let them out.
Yeah, I can see the rationale behind making room in institutions for very violent criminals, and I don't know what the middle ground would be, the solution would be. I feel like there certainly needs to be something more than just incarceration. There should be some kind of job training or something that will give these folks hope, or even the chance of opportunity to do something better when they get out, rather than just being on parole or probation and having no job skills at all, and having no ability to take care of their children or whatever, but maybe start training them to do something, or putting them into some kind of programs, but doing something more than just incarceration, I think.
There's some programs out here, and I'm sure Dave's aware of them, but there's not very many prisons, or state penitentiaries that have this program, because they either don't have the room for it, or it's just something they're just not looking into. But some of the prisons out here in Northern California have a wild horse program.
Really?
Where they bring the Mustangs, who get rounded up once a year, 2 or 3 times a year, and they send, a dozen or so of them to the different prisons, and the inmates work with these horses to train them to sell to the public. And not only that, but the inmate is learning the horse culture, and is learning, how to, basically he's being trained how to train a horse.
And people skills.
And
through the horse.
These guys are coming out and being, top dollar horse trainers, and they've done hard time. And, the program has been successful. I think Carson City is one of them. There's one out here in Sacramento, where I just went to an auction that they had. And in the audience was 2 or 3 ex-inmates who are now got business cards and are horse trainers and doing excellent. So, I mean, there's programs out there. You just have to find them. And not only that, but, we talked about it for a short period of time, but horses are medicine for a lot of people.
Big time.
If it's not for PTSD, but now you've got a guy that's in prison who's, you've got the next, 5, 6, 7, 15, 20 years of his life, and instead of, doing the same old, working out, beating up on other inmates or attacking the corrections officers, is you put them, with these horses, and these horses and them are going to work together to calm them down, and to get them back on track, and to see that there's, more going on than what's going on in the prison. And these guys are being very successful from the statistics that are showing out there.
When I went back to the jail division, we have a trustee camp, and we had about 130 male inmates, and then female inmates were around about 65. I had a program with animal control that we would have inmates work at animal control every day, and hang out with these dogs and cats and horses and whatever. You'd be surprised how well adjusted these inmates were. I mean, they were in trustee status, but they came back with a whole different attitude. They had more people skills, how to talk to a cop, or their wife or their mother, just because dealing with an animal,
Yeah.
It really helps,
Yeah, that's important.
You can tell we're out here in the country because you can hear the shooting in the background.
Is that what that is? I wasn't sure what that was.
That was
I was going to ask.
Yeah, we're out in the middle of nowhere. Your shooting range is in your backyard.
Yeah, it's nice. It's really nice.
Let's go shoot a couple rounds out, though. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Now, on top of the horses, when it comes to PTSD and helping with that, you guys are also starting something else to help people in this area with PTSD, correct?
I I have a history. I should say I started a history probably about 15 years ago where I learned how to restore military vehicles, World War II specifically. I did World War II reenacting. That was actually part of my getaway from law enforcement. That was my way of getting out of the stress and thinking about the everyday. The wife wasn't real happy about that. Because she thought that I was basically trying to get away from her, but what I was trying to get away from was all the thoughts and things in the back of my mind. It's hard to explain, and again, that was my problem, which is why I got the PTSD, is because I didn't sit down with my wife and say, this is what's going on in my mind, and I just need to get it out. And the best way for me to do it is to find something to do. So I got heavily involved in World War II reenacting, which, for those who are Civil War reenactors out there, it's the same thing. It's like you've gone back in time for a weekend. You eat, drink, and sleep World War II. That includes the vehicles. So I started restoring World War II vehicles with the help of a very good, very good mentor, Indian Euler, James Euler, who's passed away. Taught me a lot about how to restore cars, but what I had also done when I was working for Long Beach is I helped them to restore two police cars. One was an actual police car at one time. One was made to look like an old paddy wagon. And I'm huge into police history. I love police history, military history too, but I'm, being that I was a cop for so long, I got involved in the Police Historical Society with Long Beach. And the more I looked into it, the more I liked it. Well, one of the things that made me want to be a cop when I was about 6 years old was seeing this old 70s boat of a police car flying down the road with a little gumball light on top with the siren, and I it just in my mind said that's what I want to do. Well, I got to restore a type of car like that for Long Beach. So once I was diagnosed with PTSD, one of the issues that you end up getting is you lose all interest in pretty much anything you've loved, your hobbies, anything. You stop caring for yourself, and that's the biggie, is you start losing interest in the stuff that you love. Unfortunately, that's where it comes with when you start losing interest in your family and things that are going on in your life. And once I acknowledged what was going on, I said, okay, you know what? I need to get back into something that I really like doing, and that was restoring police cars. So I met Dave a couple of years ago. I'm not sure exactly how we met.
The regulators.
Oh, that's right. We joined a cowboy reenacting group, and I think it was fun at the time. And we both, because it was cops involved, it was law enforcement.
Guns.
For some of us, yeah, of course they had guns in it, and badges.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't really where we wanted to go. I think we tried it for a while, and it just wasn't working out for us. And but we've kept in contact, and then him being retired, me being retired, we like cars.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about a car show that used to be up here that they're trying to get started up again, and it just piqued my interest again. I had just finished selling my last World War II vehicles that I'd restored. Some guys playing around with it up in Finland.
Oh.
And so I thought, you know what? I really had fun when I was, going to the car shows and hanging out with cops. And there's a huge police car show in Ripon, California. One of the biggest ones, I believe, out here on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
And I used to do that with the Long Beach cars. The people are great. They're either retired cops, current cops, family members of cops, or just someone who just likes, law enforcement, and wants an old police car to restore and hang out with. It's all family.
It is family.
And they're good people.
Yeah.
I think even someone who's part of a different car club culture would come out there and see that the atmosphere is great. Everyone's talking to everyone. No one's looking at anybody any different, but everybody's checking out their cars. Everybody's talking about what they're doing since the last time they had the car show. And so that made me want to, I want to hang out with these guys again, because that's part of the healing process, is hanging out with nice, friendly, humorous, people that, you only get to see once in a while, like Christmas, it's like family. You only get to see them once a year. So I ended up buying this car that's behind us, the 65 Galaxy, and I was going to make it a California State Police car from that era. And talking to Dave, I told Dave about it, and he got interested in maybe getting himself a car.
You always get me in trouble.
And unfortunately, he found the car, and he went and got it. So that's part of our project, was to put these cars together and go out to Ripon. But the one thing I wanted to do, one more bigger thing I wanted to do, was maybe come up with a car club that doesn't specifically has to do with just police cars, but just any kind of car whatsoever. And if you don't have a car, if you want to bring your horse, if you want to, bring your dog, if you can't afford a car and you've got 2 or 3 buddies who all together can, scrounge up the money and buy a car and put it together, the healing process and the hanging out with the camaraderie, the going to the car club, the car shows, even if you drive down to the local restaurant or something like that once a week or once a month, just give them something to look forward to and to vent, to complain, about whatever, it's something for them to look forward to, and it moves them past where they've been. So, that's something that I'm going to start doing is, and with Dave's help, with his busy schedule, because he's a very busy man, even though he's retired, which everyone keeps telling me I actually have 2 part-time jobs and I'm supposed to be retired too, is to get this car club up and running. There's a car show that they used to have up here in Garden Valley, that
Big.
The guy who ran it is no longer doing that, and Dave has asked me to do that, and I'm seriously considering running that, just try and get my feet wet and see, how it goes.
Yeah.
But to also get, recruits into, if you want to, other people, like I said, other people in their lives, you don't have to be law enforcement, military, or fire, dispatcher, towing, whatever, to get PTSD or have suicidal thoughts. It can happen to anybody. And if, giving them something to look forward to build a car, to camaraderie, to talk on the phone, to, talk about car parts or talk about cars you're looking at, or go with them to go pick it up, or, if you just say you don't want a car, if you want to bring your horse, in the vehicle code, a horse, you can actually get a drunk driving arrest on a horse. So anything that helps with people to get together for family and friends and to talk about what's going on in their life, I'm all in for it. So that's my plan is to get a car club going specifically for first responders and PTSD survivors, no matter where they're from.
Yeah.
And get that car club going. And when Dave's got time and actually starts getting his 51 together,
51 Plymouth, baby.
we're gonna make sure we're gonna spearhead this thing and make sure that people will know that we're out there and we're out there to take care of each other.
I can't wait. I already talked to Sheriff DeAugustini, El Dorado County Sheriff DeAugustini. He's a friend of mine, and I told him I can't wait to pull your ass over in my 51, and that's exactly what he did. He started laughing. So yeah, that'll be fun.
So anyways, the car behind me was the car that I was going to put together. It's a 65 Galaxy, and I've always, like I said, I was a big World War II person. I love the music, I love the culture, but there's also the 1940s era of just law enforcement. And so what I've decided to do is sell this car, which it actually sold. It's sold to a company in New Jersey for some new TV show that's going to be coming out that takes place in the 60s.
Okay.
And I'm going to end up getting myself a 40s car somewhere in the next few months, I hope, and start restoring that, and that will be my primary car. And depending on how I can market it as far as for PTSD or for any first responders or just folks out there who have had something traumatic in their life, the loss of a loved one or anything of that nature, if they've been a victim of an assault or whatever it may be, that they're amongst people that are survivors.
Yeah.
And they have something to look forward to and someone that they can talk to if they need to.
Yeah. That's important. It's you mentioned before not just having friends that are cops, and that I agree with that, and also, but it is important too to stay in contact if you can with folks that are especially the retired people?
I do. I after I left Long Beach, and this is one of the hard things about PTSD and being a survivor is my very good friend and partner at the time. First, he was mad when I left the agency. Very upset because we actually became very close. He was the one I could actually talk to in the car about stuff that was going on in my life. You know, he's younger than I was, but he just had a different sense about ideas to help me through. When I left and came up here, and I talked to him, you know, not as much as we used to, and I told him I had PTSD. He was quiet for quite a while. He was, I don't think he wanted to acknowledge that I could get PTSD. I guess maybe everyone thought that I had the type of attitude with my sense of humor and everything else that it was just something that wouldn't happen, and he wouldn't acknowledge it for the longest time. And we started talking a little bit more, and but we never talked about the PTSD part. He never asked how I was doing. He just asked, you know, what's going on? What are you doing at home? How's work? But didn't want to acknowledge that part of it. And I think finally he started kind of slowly recognizing that, you know, we needed our friendship back, and we've slowly gotten it back, but it's not anywhere it used to be when we were in the car together.
Yeah. And you still stay in contact with him now, though?
Not as much as we used to. I still, you know, I got Dave over here that bugs me every once in a while. You know, we see each other when we're, you know, there's a fire or something in the area, and we pass each other. You know, Dave, you know, being a fire commissioner, all that kind of stuff, he's got all the know-how and everything about what's happening in the community here. So if I know he's out doing something, I know there's something serious going on, and he's Johnny on the spot to help. So if it's not Dave, you know, I've got the supervisor at the agency that I'm working for now. We're pretty good friends. If I've got an issue or whatever, I can go talk to him. I'm actually working for a really great agency right now. Great boss, 100% behind me on anything that's PTSD related, peer counseling. If there are more chiefs like him in the country, we would have almost nothing left of, you know, trying to solve the problem of suicides with first responders.
Yeah, I think talking to the old timers, I belong to a club too with Placer County, and our department was old. I mean, we had a lot of older cops that were retiring, deputies that were retiring. And so now it's on a Facebook page, and we get together once in a while, and there's a lot of us.
Eat donuts?
Eat donuts, drink beer.
Shoot guns.
Shoot guns, and we get together. And it helps a lot talking to the guys that retire and laugh. I mean, the stories that we tell, and of course there's some crying too. But the laughter is unbelievable, and I'm excited every time we get together to talk about the old days, and even with the old cars. I mean, that Ripon car show, I was stoked when I went with you down there. I wish it was a 3-day event.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and anybody out there listening that whether you have a car or not, if you're a current cop, retired, and it's not just law enforcement. They have fire trucks down there. They've got ambulances down there. They've got ex-police cars, and then the people just want to come down and see this show. And there's a Code 3 parade that goes through the town. And Ripon, if you know where Ripon is, it's not a huge town, but it's growing. Menlo Park and the city of Ripon put this thing on, and they do an incredible show. There's awards for the different categories, and they've pretty much, you know, came up with categories and awards for just about every car there. Even military, if you've got a Jeep or a truck or something like that you want to bring out, you know, please do. And if you've got a car that, you know, is just falling apart but looks the part, bring it out. It might win something. You never know. Yeah, that's you know, a good part of it.
Talked a lot about PTSD. What are some of the signs that you two have maybe experienced that those that are in the business right now may be able to see or to recognize?
If you're a supervisor at work and someone under your command is starting to get into some hot water. He's just not filling out his reports. He's, or his reports are just lacking. Showing up late for work, showing dirty uniforms, and yeah, there's guys out there that just wear a uniform for 2 weeks straight. But the guy who all of a sudden is just not him anymore or her anymore, that's probably going to be your first clues. Is there's something going on either at home? Maybe they're having kid issues. Maybe they're having marital issues. Maybe he's about ready to go through a divorce. Maybe he just lost. When I was testing with Colorado County, just before I was hired, my mom had passed away. I was on my way to work. My sister had called me and says, "Can you go by our parents' house? I think Mom is sick." And when I got to my parents' house, I found my mom was unconscious and unresponsive, and basically she had a massive stroke. And so I was basically the first one to find her. I was there 2 weeks later when they pulled the plug, and then a month later I am starting a new job. So, as excited as I was to come up here, I didn't have my A game with me because some of the major stressors that they tell you when you go to counseling for depression or PTSD is a big move, a new job, getting fired from a job, losing a loved one, working at a place where you don't know anyone, major stressors. And if you're going through a divorce, even if you're going to get married, the stressors that go in, trying to make sure you have the right time off, that you're getting the right ring, that you have a place for you guys to live. If you got kids or they have kids, there's so much that goes on into it, and you can pick out pretty easily, someone's having a hard time with stuff at work. If someone who used to do something all the time is no longer doing it. Like one of the key things with me is, I was heavily in the World War II, and I loved the friends that I did it with, and it was like overnight. The next day, I just wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't think twice about it. I just I figured I'm just burned out. There's so many. There's those kind of signs, and then there's the drinking. There's showing up to work or coming home when you used to not go out drinking. If they're starting to act funny, if they're goofier than they normally are because either they're on some kind of medication or they're not on some kind of medication, the wrong kind of medication. If they're being more heavy-handed at work, if they're late for roll call, getting out to roll call, and not showing up for calls. If it takes a while for dispatch to get a hold of them, you have to. There's the signs that supervisors see, that your beat brothers and sisters see, that just is not that person. I can't speak for everyone. There's the case of the Florida police officer who showed up for work and completed a shift, made a couple of arrests, did a couple of reports, and then went to the back parking lot of this police station and shot and killed himself. I don't know if anybody saw something different that day. It's hard to tell sometimes. Some guys are really straight-faced. And I'm going to mention this and try and keep a straight face. Long Beach just lost a sergeant, a retired sergeant. This guy, his nickname was Hodges. If for those of those guys and ladies out there who've seen the movie Colors, Hodges was the veteran gang detective or gang officer for LAPD who knew everyone and talked to everyone, and everyone liked him. And if they had a problem, they would talk to him. Well, that's how this guy was. His name was Don Campbell, Sergeant Campbell. Sir, rest in peace. And he was retired 28 years. Was a gang officer and a gang sergeant, big time tactical guy. I was on the SWAT team. He was one of our 2 or 3 patrol rifle trainers, and was one of my mentors. We actually worked in the car together when I first started. He was one of my FTOs, and he, after 28 years, he had been retired a year. And about a week and a half ago, drove himself to one of our substations in the parking lot and shot himself in the heart, and he passed away. He is the second gang officer in almost 2 years that, again, was one of my training officers who has committed suicide. So I know with Hector, I heard that he was having family problems, and again, maybe something that he was getting in trouble at work. He was showing all the signs of PTSD. Now, whether he was not asking for help or if they weren't taking him off to the side and helping him, because he would take the shirt off of his back for you. A super nice guy. And so some are showing signs. I don't know if with Sergeant Campbell, if he was showing signs, if, the stress of not working anymore, because that's also part of the problem is some of these guys don't have something to look forward to when they retire. Their entire life is wrapped around law enforcement and the people they work with. And there's a good movie out there, old movie, and I'm sure Dave will probably know it. It's called The Centurion, with George C. Scott, where he's an LAPD cop, and it's one of these things where he's eats, sleeps, and craps cop, and I think in the movie, I think he's like a few months retired or maybe a year retired, and he's going to the police station to talk to his buddies and hang out and have coffee with them, and he goes home and does himself. I think that's where it comes in. Like my ex-neighbor Jim Smith, when I first wanted to be a police explorer, told me don't hang out with just cops. There's a purpose behind that, and I think that's part of it. And I don't know if he had people outside of work that he hung out with, but nevertheless, he's gone, and he was such a wealth of information, such a an encyclopedia of law enforcement. We'll never get that back. There will never be his equal in Long Beach, if not in law enforcement. So so that's some of the signs. I mean, whether you're going to show the signs or not, I don't know if he was. I haven't heard. It's still new down there. I know it was a huge hit to the department, but again, it's the second Long Beach cop in a couple of years, and a friend who's committed suicide, and it takes a toll. Takes a toll on everyone. So now you got to think of the family. Now you got to think of all the officers who looked up to him are now going, holy crap! If it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. This guy literally was someone you could probably give him, a piece of rebarb and he'd shit nails. I mean, he was hardcore, and maybe that was his downfall. But another really good cop, and all of them, all these guys who are committing suicide, they're all real good cops. They've all done their time, and I know I'm going on, and I just go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to say no. That's a great point, which is these men and women, they put in years of their life and they sacrifice so much for the community, for the department, for the brothers and sisters, and I feel like the agency and management and us that are in the job now, we're not doing enough to provide as much support as we can to them, or to be as consistent when it comes to mental health wellness and following up with them when they're out on injury. If they injure themselves on duty,
right?
They go out, they're out for 6 months, a year. I'm guilty for this too. I rarely reach out to some of the folks that are injured, and I'm sure that would probably mean a lot to them to know that we still care about them for what they've done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, they start to fall down into that hole, and it gets tough, and there needs to be more support from us, from the agencies.
If they're involved in a shooting, if a car accident, even getting hit by a drunk driver on duty or something like that, they seem to lose a little bit of their, I don't want to say their attitude, but they come back different, especially if they're involved in an OIS.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of officers in Long Beach that were involved in OIS, and it was like no big deal the next day. And for the weeks after that, I kept talking to him. He was out on my unit, and I was able to talk to him, and he seemed to be doing just fine. So some people, are okay with maybe in their own mind they've come to terms with themselves that he had to do what they had to do, and they can move forward. And there's those that just can't. Big difference between taking the life of an adult and taking the life of a minor.
Mm-hmm.
Any time a kid's involved, anytime from car accident or SIDS or gang shooting, anything like that, just be aware, supervisors and family members and loved ones out there. If your loved one's involved in some kind of an incident involving a small kid, just keep an eye on them, because that will definitely take a toll, especially if you have kids of your own.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a 13-year-old little thug that robbed a lady down the street, but when they're laying on the ground full of holes from a rival gang, you look at them a whole lot different.
We had a case where the mother aborted her child in a outhouse, a construction outhouse. We had to tip over, not just me, other officers, we had to tip over the outhouse to get the baby out of the tank. That was tough. That was tough.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah. Seeing the baby and then dealing with the smell and fishing the baby out of the feces, that was tough. That was tough on all of us. And that's still, as soon as you start talking about a child, that's why the story popped up. I didn't even think about it until you talked about it.
Yeah.
About that.
And I've got one of those in my background. I still can't talk to it to this day. It's still too hard. And it happened it was 2004, which as far as the counselors were concerned, I think even far back as I can go, I think pretty much was the end of my career. I just didn't know it yet, involving a minor. But it's just as far as signs, I mean, like I said, there's some that are going to show the signs and some aren't. Some are going to be real obvious, and some of them aren't. I'm not a big religious person, but I can guarantee you that since coming up here and everything that's happened since I've come up here with the PTSD, the getting, my dream coming true, working for the sheriff's department for a short period of time, now working for an agency that just has my back 100%. God has played a big role in this. And if somebody told me, and I can't remember who exactly it was, but in layman's terms, basically is you might want something that you've always wanted, something that's super important to you, whether it be a job, a car, and I take this as a career. I made the move from Long Beach up here to El Dorado County to complete a dream I've always wanted to do. And I got to work, I got to wear the badge, I got to wear the uniform, and I got to drive the car, I got to drive around in the community I've always wanted to work in. But 3 months later, it was done. I beat myself up and couldn't figure out why why would God do this? It can't be God. It's got to be the devil. It's got to be the evil on this part of the planet. And so what was told to me is, if God might let you have something, He might let you do something you always wanted to do. But if it's not right for you, He's going to take it away. And I have to trust in that. And since I've been up here, I've found a really great spot that's super quiet that actually helped a lot with my healing process. I've been able to recover, pretty much 100%, and I'm now working for another law enforcement agency on a part-time basis because I choose to. I've got really great friends. But the other thing, that I've had to think about, and stuff that was told to me is, we're all fighting to either go to heaven. That, when you do something bad, that you go to hell. I think what's, in my mindset and how I've kind of, had to put things together is I think we're all living in hell because there can be no other place around. We're fighting evil to help people out. Cops, law enforcement, military, and the fire service, and all the other agencies out there who are trying to do good and the best way that they can. Is the way I look at it, for us to see the horrors and deal with the horrors that we deal with, this has to be hell. And our way of being successful and doing the good that we need to do is by going to heaven. And however we get there, other than taking your own life, because, like I've said before, is God has a plan for all of us. And when you disrupt that by taking your own life, you screw up his plan and a bunch of other people's plans that it messes it up. It puts ripples in the water, and it has to start all over again. And so let God be the one that takes you up. If it's you passing away from a heart attack or being killed in a car accident or something like that, however it is that God wants to take you off of this planet and take you up to where you don't have to worry about hurt anymore, let him do that. Don't do it yourself. Don't hasten it. Just let God be the person that's going to do that for you, and just know that if you believe or can think that where you're at right now is hell, you've got it made, and where you're going to go after this is nothing but beautiful.
Yeah, it's for some, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle every day.
It is.
And I spoke to someone once who said, "Can you just, if you're thinking about doing it, can you just give it a day, just another sunset,
right?
And can you do another day after that?" And that's
right. If you can get through this day, you can get through the next day, and the next day, and the next day.
And I know it's tough, and like you said, it's important to, if you're feeling that way, to reach out to somebody and talk to somebody. And
absolutely.
And there's and you mentioned this earlier today, there unfortunately is, not just with law enforcement, but just our culture in general, there's such a stigma when it comes to suicide, and the people don't want to talk about it, because once you feel like once you mention it to somebody that you're having these kind of feelings, then you're going to be looked at a certain way. You can't be trusted, or you may be looked at as dangerous, or whatever it may be. And you're looking for somebody just to listen to you. You're looking for help.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't. I wish there wasn't that stigma around it.
Help is just a person away, a phone call away. It's a look away. It's a friend away. It's just around the corner, and all you have to do is you have to seek it, but you have to find it. And that's the problem with first responders, law enforcement especially, is because of our A-type personality, which is what every agency wants out there, is we don't talk about what's going on. Well, that doesn't matter if you've been a cop, since the 80s, like, when I started off or when Dave started off, or if you're a cop of the 90s or the 2000s, the idea of keeping it to yourself has got to stop. You got to talk about it, and it doesn't matter who you talk to about it. If it's your loved ones, if it's, I can go over, if I'm having a bad day, I can go over and I can talk to my horse, and he's either going to put his head on my shoulder, or he's going to, ask me for something to eat, one of the two things. So, but you know what? I'm talking.
Yeah.
And if I'm not talking to, someone at work, if I'm not, talking to, the heavens, then I'm talking to someone. Or if someone at work can see I'm having a bad day, that person is actually, keen enough, or some people just really have the sense where they can look at you and go, "What's wrong?"
Mm-hmm.
And my wife is that way, and she'll, if I'm having an off day or something like that, every now and then, she could tell, something's wrong, and sometimes we talk about it, or sometimes I just acknowledge the fact, and I just say, I'm just not having a good day, and she's like, okay, and I know if I want to talk to her, I can go talk to her or not, but I know she's right around the corner. So, yeah. And that's all it takes. It's just, someone who's got the keen sense to acknowledge, just same with work. If someone at work is just not being their normal self, something's wrong. And even if it's just going off and saying, "Hey, are you okay? Do you want to talk? Is there something wrong? Do you need to take a break? We can cover your calls for a couple of hours or whatever. Do you need to go home?" That's all it takes for that person to maybe, stop thinking about suicide and know that he has someone to talk to. He or she has someone to talk to. Yeah.
And if you're feeling those things, yeah, and the bottom line is we're all in it together. We're not just here to back each other up on the street against, the bad guys, but we're also here to support each other.
Sure, we're all
because
family.
Absolutely.
We're definitely family.
we know what each other's going through, and no matter what badge or patch you have on your shoulder, we should all be able to, be there for each other.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Before it's too late.
Right. And it's we're not going to be able to stop everyone. That's the sad part of this whole thing. But if there's someone who's having that, unfortunately, if someone's determined to do it, they're going to do it. The whole idea is for them to, before they get to that point, to have someone to talk to have someone that they can go to and say, I'm feeling crappy. I feel like I want to hurt myself. And it's like, all right, so let's, then we do the next thing. And then the person who is working their way to that thought or feeling is nipping it in the bud way before it even gets to the thought of wanting to take themselves off of this planet before it's time. So really paying attention. And again, this 99.9% of the time the signs are going to be out there. The partner in the car, the guy in the Hummer, the fire crew, they're out there, the search and rescue, the dispatcher who's having a hard time dispatching after something major that she just dispatched to, the tow truck driver who maybe is standing there staring at the car and all the blood and guts and whatever else that's at the car, don't just stay in your car and finish the report. Go out there and talk with them or her and say, are you okay? Do you need a break? You want to get another driver out here? We all have to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. Case in point, after our shift, I walked in the locker room and there was one of the deputies with his head down, and he looked white as a ghost. Okay. And I said, "Hey, what's going on, dude?" And I really thought that he was going to pop himself right then and there. And if I didn't, say, "Hey, what's going on?" and I left, he might have popped himself because he didn't look right at all. And I'm keen at that. I can pick up when somebody's having a bad day. I'm great.
Some are better than others.
Yeah.
And it's not because they want to. It's because what they're facing, they don't want to deal with that anymore.
Right.
It's not because they want to end everything. So, yeah.
Can I get one of the
Yes.
murder of the two deputies that I was involved
Please.
with? Yeah, I was involved in a shootout in 2014.
I'm gonna bring it a little bit closer.
Oh, how's that?
Good.
Yeah. In 2014, Deputy Danny Oliver was a deputy in Sac County. He drove up on at a Motel 6 in the Arden area to check on a suspect in a vehicle, and the suspect shot Danny in the forehead and killed him. Illegal alien. The suspect then took the stole vehicle and drove up to Auburn and shot my buddy, my partner, Mike Davis. I get a little emotional now. Every time I tell this story, I get emotional because a lot of people were involved. So Danny was my neighbor, lived down the street from me. I find out that Danny was murdered, so I drive over to Danny's house, and as soon as I was pulling in, Sac County was pulling in. So I says, okay, I'm going to go home and talk to Sac's going to talk to his wife. So I get home, and I'm having lunch, and the chaplain calls me and says, did you hear about Mike? And I says, no, what? He says, well, Mike was just shot and killed up in Auburn. I went to my knees. I mean, I had two of my buddies shot in one day from different agencies, but two of my brothers. So I leave. I knew the suspect was trying to make himself into the canyon to get away. And I had my AR-15, and I had my 9mm, and I was going to pop him. I was going to do a felony takedown. I was going to say halt. I was just going to pop him the same way he popped Danny and Mike. Later on, I talked to both sheriffs, Placer County and El Dorado, and and both of them said, you would have been a hero. We would have backed you up on that. So I found out that the suspect was in a house, and at the same time, my partner that was working that day, he was hiding behind a tree shooting at the suspect and watched Mike Davis bleed out right in front of him. My partner couldn't get to him. I mean, Detective Mike was he's bleeding out right in front of him. And that's how he got PTSD, my partner. He was diagnosed with that in 2014 after that shootout. So I get down to Roseville Hospital, nothing I can do. I drive down to Roseville Hospital where I go in the ER, and FBI, Secret Service, Placer County, Sac County, all the different agencies are in the ER. And I walk in and see Mike Davis laying on a slab. That was one of the toughest things that I went through in my career. It's seeing your own brother bled out on a slab.
It's one of the hardest things is to see. First, if it's an officer with your agency that has been hurt that you're not that familiar with, it's not, and not to sound mean, it's not that hard because you weren't close to them. But when you're seeing, and it's the same with the military folks, when you've got the guy who's watching your back, and the sniper takes him out, and this is the guy that you've been probably went through boot with, or been patrolling and hitting houses together, and all of a sudden he's now gone. It just comes to an abrupt end. And when you see someone as close as a friend who whose life has been taken away, especially just the setting, it's already upsetting. You've got all these agencies, all these people. There's probably other crying and tears and stuff going on somewhere, but see someone that you pretty much love. I mean, you got to think about it. We spend more time with our partners and stuff out on the street than we do with their own families. And when they get taken away, it's basically your brother, sister. It's your pardon the expression, but it's your beat wife, in the car with you that is gone now. Your personality has now just disappeared. The person you've not got to know and been close to, and probably know their family too.
Yeah.
That's what it's just one of those things. It's hard. Might be one of those things. Obviously, it's been it's 2014 with the shootout and all that stuff with Danny Oliver and the other deputy. And if you were to talk to any of those deputies or whatever, I guarantee you they're going to turn their head or they're going to tear up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it doesn't go away. It's
Still
something they're
happening.
always going to live with, and
Right.
and with the emotions that Dave's showing now. I mean, for those out there who aren't in law enforcement, and those who may be watching this that are just trying to pick up on some kind of intel for your criminal part of your life, is unfortunate for you. We are human. And we're not machines, and we take into consideration who you are when that time comes, whereas they don't. They see us as a threat that's going to put them back in prison, or they've got some kind of a scorecard to fulfill, and they do that by killing law enforcement, who are the only things that stand between good and bad. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. There was a quote that one of our deputies stated, and he said, "If the suspect is willing to shoot an officer unprovoked, then no one is safe."
how true is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great quote. Great quote.
Just an extreme threat to the public safety.
Yeah, and these guys don't care. They don't give a rat's ass. And the suspect I'm talking about was deported 3 times.
Well, didn't he even make a comment after he was found guilty? Do we want to get into that?
I was in the court proceedings one day, and you can tell every officer, uniform and not uniformed, wanted to go and bash this guy's face in, right in front of the judge.
Yeah, and I'm sure the judge was probably thinking the same thing.
So this guy was, I'm sure, completely.
He was a whack job, total whack job. He would laugh in court at the cops.
But they had all kinds of problems with him in court. If I recall, he had
Quite
to
a
be
bit.
removed from court a
Yeah.
couple of times. But the comment, the comment that I'm speaking of is he
No.
basically said, "The only thing I'm sorry of is I didn't kill more of you."
Yeah.
So I mean,
Very
there's
true.
his mindset. So now you've got, talk about a form of PTSD or a form of depression or a anxiety issue, is all these cops, all these law enforcement people, and all the family members and family of the two deputies that were killed are now listening to this guy wishing he would have killed more deputies. And if you can't picture in your mind these guys wanting to jump through their skin to keep this guy from even hurting, I'm sure he's probably going to be a problem when he gets to the prison where he's at, with the corrections people there.
I hope he's not there very long.
So, depending on how crazy he is and whatever else, maybe someone from the population will take care of him. I mean, who knows? But that's the day we live in. That's where we're at.
When Danny's funeral was on a Monday, and the next day Mike's funeral, 2 funerals in side by side. That was really tough. SAC DAs were sitting in front of me, and Placer County DAs were sitting in front of me. I lean over and whispered to all of them. I says, "You get him and put him down, or I will." And they turned around and looked at me like, "Crap, you mean it, dude?" Because we all wanted to put this guy down, no matter what. No matter what.
And that's something that the general population probably don't realize, is that when an officer is killed in line of duty, their family they don't just endure that moment in time. It's a lot of time thereafter. It's
Forever.
going to court with the suspect and having to go through a trial and see this person. And not only that, but having their loved ones' actions questioned in the media.
Right.
And having to see this on television.
Right.
And having their kids have to go to school and deal with hearing from other kids, again, bringing up questions about their father's or mother's actions.
Right.
It's tough.
It's very tough.
And I don't know how much support goes to the families beyond just leading up to the funeral, because there's a large outpouring when that happens, and there's this huge amount of support. But what happens afterward? What happens after the funeral?
Right.
And
the brothers and sisters that I deal with, they're fantastic. We still get together. I still see Danny's wife. She moved somewhere else. She had to leave the house. That's why, matter of fact, Danny and his wife moved up to Garden Valley to get away from the crime in Sacramento. And he gets popped.
Yeah.
Right? He gets horses. They're going to live the great life in the country, and he has to deal with a scumbag like that and get popped in the forehead. And as I keep on saying, this illegal alien that's been deported 3 times. At the time, at the funeral, Governor Jerry Brown was there. I didn't look at him.
Yeah, and that's something that I think in the law enforcement community we need to start doing is we get the governors, we get the senators, we get councilmen or whatever else who want to come up and talk on stage and talk about what a loss and stuff that is, but they're doing absolutely nothing to fix it. Matter of fact, they're making it worse. And I think as a law enforcement community, at least in California, if not in your own state or your town, is you need to boo those people off the stage, or you need to get up and turn your back to them in a silent protest to let them know how disgusted you are with the laws that they come up with, and how they want to show their face to the public so that they can get the vote next time around, but they're doing absolutely nothing to protect the family members or the cops themselves from things like this happening. And I think real soon it's getting to that point to where maybe you might take some slack from your bosses, and you know what, and unfortunately for the CHP guys out there who do the dignitary protection, you guys need to start, if this is what's happening and you don't like what's happening, you guys need to do something about it. You need to stand up. You need to say, I don't want to work on this detail anymore because I don't believe in this guy, and it's a job. What are they going to do? They're going to put you back in patrol. Oh well, so is life. But if you want to work for someone who doesn't give a crap about your life or the life of another law enforcement officer out there who is fighting for you to go home safe to your family, you need to start speaking up. We in the law enforcement community, fire, military, all of us, we need to start speaking up in a respectful way that lets those people who want to come to your funerals or to some thing that has to do with the loss of a law enforcement officer or something like that, we need to start showing in some way or somehow we are not happy with what they're doing, and make it, because the media's there. That is going to be something the media is going to show. That's not something that they're just going to black out, and they're going to show that we are disgusted with the way someone who's a fake about law enforcement and they don't have our back.
Yeah.
This is what Jerry Brown said at the time at the funeral. This was October 24th, 2014, when they were shot. But during the funeral, Governor Brown at the time said, "The brutal murders of Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver and Sheriff's Deputy Michael Davis are tragic reminders of the sacrifices we demand on our peace officers and the incredible courage they display as they protect our communities." Governor Brown's wife, Ann, says, "And I extend our deepest sympathies to the families, friends, and colleagues of these two brave public servants. We also are mindful of the other officer and by the bystanders. Other officers were shot, one other officer, and a bystander was shot, who were wounded or terrorized by today's terrible events." Governor Brown signs the sanctuary law October 5th, 2017. What's that tell you?
It tells you a whole lot, actually.
Yeah.
And SB 54, that built off of an existing bill already that was from,
Correct.
what was it, 2013, I think, which was, I think, established something about not prolonging the detention of illegal immigrants beyond what was already they're being detained for, so that ICE can come and get them. So this bill definitely built off that. But to go back to what you said, Rich, and just to be honest, it's not about left or right either. It's just about who shares the same morals or the same beliefs that law-abiding citizens do, and who's going to support the police. So it's not about, when it comes to politics, Democrat or Republican. It's about what laws are going to be there to help the police, what laws are going to be there to also importantly help the victims, and not just make it easier for criminals to commit more crimes.
Absolutely. And everybody, the politicians and even in law enforcement, we see it down at the patrolman who's watching our friends work their way up the ladder, and some of them never change, and some of them turn into complete, politicians.
Seen that.
It's very rare, very rare that you see someone you work patrol with go up the chain and stay the same. Yep. They turn into politicians, and there's no difference between a council member working their way up and to being the governor or something like that. If the agenda works for them, and it's going to get them votes so they can keep that position for the the next term and the next term, then that's what they're going to do. And if it hurts someone along the way, the one who is making sure that your state doesn't go into a state of chaos, then they're going to do what works for them. If losing a couple of deputies or police officers or whoever doesn't work for them, then they're going to make it sound like that they care and everything else, when in fact, in all actuality, is they don't give a crap about us, and who it is that's protecting their family, who it is that's protecting them at the Capitol, who's protecting them when they're going to and from. The governor's got a dignitary protection program. What if he didn't have anybody watching his back? When the psycho that wants to come up to him and ask him for a couple of bucks and pull out a knife when, they want to watch off their wrists. What if he or she didn't have someone standing next to him, that's armed, that's running interference for him? He'd probably be in a different state. He or she would be in a different mindset of, protecting and making sure that law enforcement had everything that they needed, and that maybe when these bills came up, like AB 109 and some of these other ones, that maybe they would look at them twice and go, you know what, that doesn't work for me and the state and the people that I'm trying to protect and govern. No, we're not going to do that. But that's not the case. Unfortunately, the case is we lose officers because of decisions that are made at a higher level that affect them, not us here and the people over the state or law enforcement.
What do you say to people that I've seen this unfortunately, but that say, well, they knew what they're signing up for when they became law enforcement?
Well, they're signing up. They know the job is dangerous. They know that somewhere in their career they're going to be doing something that is going to be the worst day of their life, and they're probably going to see just as much of that. But I don't think they're signing up to work for someone that they make it harder for them to do their job on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This isn't
Right.
a decision that the state's going to be better off with. This is a decision that the governor is going to hope that he wins more votes for the next time around, and that goes for most politicians. Police unions deal with that all the time, where the police chief wants one thing and the union wants another, because the union's fighting for the little guy, and the police chief is fighting for the mayor and the city council, and what works for them and what's going to get them reelected. Then you've got some sheriffs out there who really have the deputies back. And same with police chiefs. One's elected, one's appointed. It really depends on. It's a fine line in there trying to balance everything, and I think as a ex-police officer, patrolman, and then working investigations, I can't count how many times I would want to make an arrest, and then it would be no, we're not the DA, or even my boss as well. We're gonna do this instead. It's like, well, wait a minute, this is a good deal, and they're
Right.
like, no, and then come to find out, you've got somebody knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, and they don't want that to happen to them because it's gonna cost them money, or it might leak out into the papers that this politician or this muckety-muck person is going to be in the paper because someone from their family did a no-no, and that's going to screw up their career. Never mind the people that this person hurt or had hurt or was going to hurt. It's not on their agenda, so we get screwed.
Yeah, or it could be whether or not a case is winnable for the DA.
Money,
Sure.
It's all money.
And-
it could be winnable, but it's the cost to get
Right.
to that point.
And I've heard this recently, which is I've heard people say, well, I was told in a training class or at a meeting, the DA said, or the assistant DA said, we're not going to file on these cases. So only if there's extreme injuries, then we'll do a felony version of this. And my response was always, well, we don't work for the DA's office. We got to follow the penal code. And if the penal code has elements of a crime and it meets
Right.
the elements, then we'll do our job. And if the DA wants to drop it, that's on them. But we can't abide by whether or not their case is winnable or not. We're
Right.
going to do what we're supposed to do.
Right.
We're here to help the victims,
Right.
not help them win cases.
Yeah, we don't have that luxury as law enforcement
Right.
or police officers to make that decision. We arrest them for what the elements show that we need to arrest them for, and we do so. And then the attorneys or politicians' attorneys come up with their idea of what they want to arrest or charge them with, and then
Yeah.
go to court with, and or plead to a lesser charge.
And you want to talk about liability. If we as law enforcement don't act when we're supposed to act, it's going to fall on us, not the DA's office.
Correct.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
Because people don't see the DA's office as the ones that are making the final decision. They just see it as the officer who made the arrest, and that's where it all started from.
yeah.
I mean, there's a problem in politics when the people in D.C. are telling other politicians to harass people at restaurants, to get into their face, to make it where they don't want to sit there and eat. There's an immaturity problem there when that's going on. You know that the government is collapsed when it comes down to, well, I don't like you, so I'm going to, raise my fist, and shake my fist and tell everyone in there, basically what an idiot I am to stand up and voice my opinion that I don't like you.
Mhm.
you know there's a problem in government when that starts taking place. That you know, and probably one thing that you know the general public don't get is that a public defender, a district attorney, and a police officer, after a court case is all done and settled, could actually sit down at a dinner table or take lunch together
Yes.
and talk normal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just how the game is played. Well, there's no difference in politics. It's all played the same way. Everyone wants to play hardball. I mean, if you look at when Trump was first inaugurated and he was up in the office signing all the stuff off, and Pelosi standing behind him with the big old smile on her face, you know, using these pins and handing out pins after he signed something. And now look at where we're at now. You know, we got you know, the government shutdown of everything and who it's affecting. And all he's trying to do is protect everyone within the nation of illegals, to keep them from killing our officers and our citizens. And you know what agenda the other side has is scary, and something that you know they really don't come out and say why they don't want the
know
wall.
why.
They just don't want the wall because you know
Well, they did before.
exactly they wanted it before. But now, because it's Trump, unfortunately, now everything is against him.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't vote for Trump, and there are some things that I completely disagree with, and there's some things that I agree with, and I think we should do that with every politician, whether it be President Obama or President Clinton or President Trump. We shouldn't just go along with everything they do, and we shouldn't just resist everything they do.
Right.
True.
And but when it comes to border security, I mean, I've never worked down on the southern border. But I can only imagine there is a lot going on down there, and we are limited resources when it comes to protecting our country and protecting our citizens. And if you look at the cost for border security, which was it $5.7 billion is what he's asking for, as opposed to over $100 billion with costs associated with illegal immigration from every country in the world.
Right. And then just the cost locally for trying them, like you said, and all the rigmarole that goes that's involved in that.
You have the court cases that cost money for those
court
things.
cases. You have civil cases. You've got
federal contracts with jails
yes.
that they're being lost. No,
but you're right about Trump. You know, there's a lot of whether you voted for him or not, he is actually doing what he says he was going to do, which is more than what most presidents that I can think of since I've been able to vote are doing. He says he's going to do something. He's been doing it, and he's done it with complete friction. And with the amount of power that he has, he really hasn't exerted it yet. He's threatened to, but he's maintaining. He likes to send out these little tweets, that gets him in all kinds of trouble, and sounds like a little kid that's having a fight with his girlfriend or something. But
they're amusing sometimes, yeah.
But if he didn't tweet, I like it. I like when he tweets, because if he didn't tweet, the media would turn everything around.
Oh, of course.
So I'm glad that he's tweeting and not going to the media and tell them.
Right.
Because if my great President Trump went to the media and says, "This is what I want to say," the media's going to spin it.
Right.
And they're not going to say what our great president's going to wanted to say.
And I think he's beating the media as far as them making stuff up rather than and I think he's definitely exposed that a lot more too since the elections or how our media kind of comes up with their own stories, even when it comes to law enforcement and so on and so forth, and not to get off track too much, but with Officer Corona, with her passing, and then there's the photo of her carrying a flag, wearing a blue dress and carrying a what we call the law enforcement flag. Where the racism on that comes from, I have no clue. Where the media came up with that, it's not.
Black Lives Matter, the gal that runs Black Lives Matter, she's the one.
Where she came up with racist, because whoever you are. Maybe you should go to your local police departments and take a look and see who are on the departments. It's not all white. For those of you who think it's a racist flag, you'd be surprised to see who are on police departments these days, especially in Southern California, Northern California. So
so that means so the red stripe for the firefighters, is that racist also?
I would assume so. I guess the green for the military.
The tow truck drivers?
Tow truck drivers, the dispatchers, I guess all
Okay,
those.
so they're all racist?
I guess those would all be racist, yes. So.
There's a Facebook page called Law Enforcement for President Trump, and I'm on it. You'd be surprised around the United States how much law enforcement loves our president right now.
He's totally pro-police, pro-law enforcement.
Very pro.
Probably the most president to ever be pro-law enforcement than any other president, and he makes no bones about it.
No, and I'm glad he's that page is there.
And that's what I was going to say was whether or not you voted for Trump or not. He does certainly appear to be very pro law enforcement, very pro police.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, Rich, you said you mentioned you wanted to talk about. There was somebody who goes around and.
Oh yes. Yes. So let me put my old man glasses on, like Dave over here.
Hey.
So.
I wear glasses too, but only when I'm driving at night.
I wasn't on SWAT, but I was a hostage negotiator. Okay, so that's another story. SWAT hated me when I'd show up as a hostage negotiator. I drive up. And
I can't imagine why.
They go, oh crap! They want to do a green light on me instead of the suspect. Go ahead.
So I am constantly scanning the internet for anything that's PTSD related, anything that will help any of the first responders out there, and that includes the military. I've actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. I've actually gotten in trouble back when I was working for Long Beach, and I can talk about this now because I am retired. And
your pension kicked in.
These are the good stories.
My pension kicked in.
Oh, the stories.
Yes, these are good stories. And I've always been, I carried a scanner. I was probably the second officer in my department next to Bob Schroeder. And I probably got the bug from him as a police explorer because he was one of our advisors and he monitored everything that happened around us. Long Beach is an agency that only cares about what happens inside Long Beach. They don't care what happens on the outside. And we are surrounded by Orange County. It was the Orange County Sheriffs and all the Orange County agencies. We have LAPD on the other side of us, and then we have basically South Central Los Angeles to the north of us. Mm. So we're surrounded by a lot of crime that goes on. And Long Beach had 5 freeways going through it, so a lot of stuff came through. So I could listen to agencies all around us and hear stuff come into our city, and I would broadcast it. And depending on who the supervisor was or the dispatch supervisor was, would basically get a message through my KDT or MDT at the time. Please stop broadcasting that information because it doesn't pertain to us. Well, I'm sorry, but if this attempted murderer or someone who just tried to run over an officer or whatever is coming through our city, they just might want to get off into our city and do some harm to one of us or another citizen. So I've always been a big advocate about law enforcement, and some of the things I used to get in trouble for was on the eastern border was the city of Seal Beach, and I was monitoring a call one night, and they had a 245 with a knife, and the suspect had dropped the knife on the major thoroughway that goes from Long Beach into their city, and
that's an assault with a deadly weapon.
Yes,
okay.
I'm sorry, 245. Yeah, assault with a deadly weapon, and it was a knife. And they were having a hard time looking for it, and they only had a couple of officers that were out on this shift, and they were pretty much slammed just prior to mutual aid kicking in. So I left my border of LA County going into Orange County to use the lights on my patrol car to help light up an area that they were searching. And I was outside my car, and next thing I know, I look up and I see one of the watch commanders from my agency looking at me with the look on their face of, what are you doing? And I told him real quick, I said, hey, I heard this call go out. I'm trying to help them find an assault knife from a 245. This sounds like a pretty good deal. He looks at me and shakes his head and says, I didn't see anything, and drove away. And that's how I knew he was on my side. And that's one of the few politicians that actually remembered how it was to be a cop. Now, that wasn't the case for everyone. I got into some hot water because I was also one of those officers who would leave my beat and actually even my division to back up another officer if they needed help and everybody was busy. There was just those nights when you just can't get the backup. I had backed up CHP officers. I backed up LAPD officers. I backed up Orange County officers. I backed up whoever needed help, no matter what the call was. If someone was asking for it back and I couldn't tell if they were receiving a backup or their backup was too far away and I was closer, I would go and I would help them out. It didn't matter who it was. I've helped the people off duty and I've helped people on duty. It's just something that's in me, which is probably why now that I'm retired, I'm still working in law enforcement and listening to the information that I get and stuff that I see that talks about officers that get hurt, officers get killed, and especially the suicide rate of law enforcement officers in the United States. I just had to do something more. I just people tell me I'm retired, I should act retired, and I just can't. It's I can't stand by and let these good folks take their lives because they're not getting help. So if there's a little itty bitty part of something that I can do to help these folks out, then I'm going to do it. And I've spoke to other people. I've spoke to other agencies. I even got a hold of my own agency after the death of Sergeant Campbell that I spoke about earlier, saying that I'll come down to the department, show my YouTube video of what's called How I'm Surviving PTSD, or just to come down there and talk to them in general, and I have not gotten a response. And we're going on almost 2 weeks. Whether they're ready for it or not ready for it, I haven't heard anything. But so what I've decided to do to get the information out there sooner is I started a YouTube video, and like I said, it's called How I'm Surviving PTSD. In my video, I give out this information. So if you're listening or you have someone that or you're actually on the verge and you're at that point where you're thinking you want to take your life or the life of someone else, before unfortunately that happens too, is you get these folks out there that take out their whole family. That seems to be something that we're seeing a little bit more of lately too. But if you want to hurt yourself or someone that you think is on the verge of hurting themselves, please call this number. And it's the National Suicide Hotline. It's 800-273-8255 and dial 1. That's for military and law enforcement. There's another line that's out there that's called the PORAC Hotline. It's a cop line here in California. It's 800-267-5463. That's 24/7, just like the National Suicide Hotline. That has to do with there's cops that are trained like myself, PTSD and peer counseling and critical incident debriefers. They can help you out, folks. But along the line, who I met is I thumbing through the internet. I found a lady. Her name is Kim Colgrove. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. She started a project called Pause First Project. And the sad story behind that is her husband was a police officer for about 8 years. He was involved in a major incident and then ended up becoming a federal agent. Did that for another 20 plus years. I believe it was about 3 months after he retired, he ended up committing suicide. So that seems to be an up and coming problem. Also is something like that. And he, obviously something in his life wasn't letting him past that point where he ended up taking his wife. So his wife, who started this Pause First Project, goes around talking about meditation, how to meditate, the things that are going on in your life as far as getting through it. We talked about yoga earlier, and again, if you're an old fart like some of us are, there was different ways that we, coped with the stuff that was going on out there, This is just another way to help, with the yoga, with meditation, or like where I'm at, living out here is, someplace that's peaceful. You have to have the peace to survive, to get through whatever traumatic incidents have happened in your career or what's going on in your life right now. And if you don't have that, then you're looking at trouble. And that's what we're trying to keep from happening is you taking your life or one of your friends taking their lives. And again, the signs are out there, most of the time. The signs are out there. If you see something that's going on, you have to, even if they're saying, no, everything's fine, you can always call these numbers, get information to find out what else you can do on the other end. There's other officers, there's counseling, there's chaplains, there's best friends, the partner in the car, whoever. There's always someone out there to talk to, and that's what you need to do. And these people are something's happened in their life. They're trying to reach out as much as possible. So don't poo-poo any of this stuff. It works, and there's a reason why it's a big deal. As far as the yoga or going to one of these classes where they talk about meditation. Salt rocks, get a salt rock, put it near your desk if you're if you work from home, or if you're working, like I did for the last 9 years of my career at a cubicle. Put a salt rock there. It's really supposed to have some properties there that will help keep you calm and kind of get you through the days. Just don't give up. Call one of these numbers. I have given out my personal email before.
And we'll put the numbers and any other information you want in the and your YouTube channel in the description too. So
okay,
if the
that'll
folks
work.
want to look at that, it'll be in the channel. So
Okay, sounds good.
We had a Sergeant Williams. He retired and got cancer, and that's the way he popped himself. Just because of a medical issue.
Yeah.
He's a straightforward, straight up guy all of his career, but when he found out he had cancer, he was done. So
That's the other problem too that we're dealing with is, besides the PTSD and the depression, is we've got folks out there who have some kind of ailment that they don't want to deal with anymore, that they're suffering from, and I can't say I understand. I can just say that I see, why this is happening and where it's going from there. But at the same time, it's like you said, it's this day. You get through this day, you can get through the next day. When you get through that day, you can get through the next day.
yeah.
When God's ready to bring you home, He's going to do it on His own. He doesn't need your help.
it's a good way of putting it.
Yep. Well, Dave, Rich, you guys have a lot of notes. Or you have anything else you want to share? Want to go over?
Really want to thank you for doing this, not just for our sake, but for any brother and sister and firefighter that is out there. The state capitol needs to know where we're coming from, and we need help. We need help from the state capitol. But just for you being here, it's helped both of us out quite a bit to get our word and our stories out. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's what it's all about, is sharing our stories, so that those that are out there now maybe going through some of the similar things that we've gone through, that they're not the only ones, and there are options out there. And as I said before, the bottom line is we're all in it together. So whether you know me or know Rich or know Dave or any other officer or deputy out there, we're all here for each other. So
Absolutely. No, I think same thing is any information that can get out there that to watch this video, or just the information that's on the video, or just for them to see that it's not a top secret thing about law enforcement and suicide, that everything is secret. Unfortunately, like we talked about, is not all the agencies out there in the U.S. want to acknowledge that there's a PTSD problem or a suicide problem. And if they can see that there are people out there willing to help outside of their department or within their department, to use the resources that are available to, watch this video as many times as possible, or the information that you're going to put on there at the end of it that has information to contact us. If I said this on to other people, I've lectured in a couple of other agencies on my own time. If it's someplace local, I will come down there and I will talk until I'm blue in the face. If it's someplace far away, if you just pay for my transportation and a place for me to stay, I'll yak all day long about.
He can yak too. Boy, can he yak.
And if you're an individual and you want to talk on the phone, if you need more resources, I can get them to you. If you're just having a bad day and you want to talk, give me a call. Any of us, no matter where you're at, if you belong to an agency and you don't want to talk to your own agency, get a hold of another department, get a hold of one of us. Let us sit there and talk with you. We can cry together. And if you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, they're crying. Like I talked about before, crying is probably one of the best things that you can do to vent. It's not a weak thing to do, because I'm sure you've cried somewhere in your time where no one can see it, and that's fine. If you want to cry by yourself, at least you're crying. But if you can cry while talking to someone else and that person isn't looking at you like there's something wrong with you, but looking at you and talking to you with concern, that's going to make all the difference in the world to keep that person going one more day.
Yeah, that's right.
So thanks for this opportunity. I really appreciate that, and to get this information out there and just what you're doing. I'm sure we won't be the last that you talk to on this subject. Yeah. I'm sure there's going to be many more. So please keep this going. So the more information that's out there, the more lives that we can save.
We'll do.
And I want to see him on a horse. Let's put him on
we'll
a
get
horse.
you on a horse.
We get video of that too.
Absolutely.
Video me falling down.
Or feeding them, anyway.
Put him on 8 seconds. 8 seconds to the horse.
Yeah, well, luckily I have Affleck, so. Well, Dave and Rich, thank you very much for taking some time out of your schedule to talk with us and invite me out here. I really appreciate it. We all do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thank you very, very much to the both of you for your service, your years of service to our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Woohoo.